It has now been reported in a Bombshell court filing covered by the Grayzone that 9/11 hijackers were apparently CIA recruits. These would be the hijackers that took over Flight 77 and flew the plane right into the side of the Pentagon. Let's go ahead and jump into this and see what we've got. This is quite fascinating and honestly quite devious. I really, really wonder what this is going to have, because I've already gone through the Grayzone article once, and I wonder if there's going to be anything for me to go ahead and cover that I didn't end up picking up on in the first place. We're going to be covering the depths of ALEC division. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. If you're unfamiliar with the Grayzone, go ahead and get acquainted now. The Grayzone is one of the best places you can go ahead and get news today currently, in my personal opinion. So what you'll see is they have their articles on the side, and it says their popular stories. Whenever you're reading an article on their website, you'll go ahead and see what they have. It's their popular stuff. It says leaked documents expose U.S. NATO-Ukraine war plans, ICC's Putin arrest warrant based on the State Department-funded report that debunked itself. And it's really going over the factors of the stories that the corporate press wouldn't dare touch within 100 miles because it's radioactive to them, because it's real journalism. So if you want some solid quality stories with quality journalism from people like Kit Klarenberg or Aaron Matei, go ahead, give them a check out, add it to your browser, set it to your favorites, whatever, all that jazz. Let's go ahead and get into this. At least two 9/11 hijackers had been recruited into a joint CIA-Saudi intelligence operation that was covered up at the highest level, according to an explosive new court filing. A newly released court filing raises grave questions about the relationship between ALEC Station, a CIA unit set up to track al-Qaeda's chief Osama bin Laden and his associates, and two 9/11 hijackers leading up to the attacks, which was subject to the cover-up at the highest levels of the FBI. And we'll be going over something from Adam Fitzgerald in just a second that covers ALEC Station, and he has a massive article on it. I read the whole thing. We won't be covering all of it because I don't want this video to be too long. But let's go ahead and finish up with this. It says, obtained by Spy Talk, the filling up of a 21-page declaration by Don Sinestro, a lead investigator for the Office of Military Commissions, the legal body overseeing the cases of 9/11 defendants. It summarizes classified government discovery disclosures and private interviews he conducted with anonymous high-ranking CIA and FBI officials. Many agents who spoke to Sinestro headed up Operation Encore, the Bureau's aborted long-running probe into Saudi government connections to the 9/11 attacks. Wonder why it was aborted. Despite the conducting multiple lengthy interviews with a range of witnesses, producing hundreds of pages of evidence, formally investigating several Saudi officials, and launching a grand jury to probe a Riyadh-run U.S.-based support network for the hijackers, Encore was abruptly terminated in 2016. That was purportedly due to a Byzantine intra-FBI bust-up over investigative methods. I wonder if this is like under Obama or under Trump. Either way, they both suck, so it doesn't really matter. When originally released in 2021 on the Office public court docket, every part of the document was redacted except an unclassified marking. Given its explosive contents, it is not difficult to see why, as Sinestro's investigation concluded that at least two 9/11 hijackers had been recruited either knowingly or unknowingly into a joint CIA intelligence operation, which may have gone awry. And this is stuff that, like, if you were to tell people, let's say, like, 5-10 years ago, you would immediately be called a conspiracy theorist and cast aside, because how dare you challenge the country if you don't support the troops? You're not a patriot. And which is such a farcical way of thinking in my mind. I understand it. You're completely co-opted by the narrative of the state, and it is effectively your god. But nonetheless, it's not something that I can be all consumed by, because I just don't buy it. I think it's a little bullshit, personally. And now I'll be jumping into this piece from Adam Fitzgerald. It says, the damning secrets inside ALEC Station. When the decade of the 1990s began, the intelligence community were just beginning to know the name Osama bin Laden. However, they won't know the specifics of his group, Al-Qaeda, until a short while later. The NSA had begun monitoring Osama bin Laden's satellite phone in the very early period of the 1990s. However, it is not known exactly what year exactly, but it's assumed either in 1992 or 1993, with the CIA monitoring bin Laden in 1991. The FBI also began their own investigation into the Saudis, noticing bin Laden's name in the files given to them from the CIA and NSA in 1995. Which at this time, the NSA was known as no such agency, because they were like, no, of course not. Why would we ever spy on the citizens of the American public? That's ridiculous. Bin Laden was using a satellite phone, which was being monitored by the NSA. When he finally discontinues use of it in 1998, in January 1996, the Justice Department creates Squad I-49, a unit composed of prosecutors of the Southern District of New York and FBI agents in the New York office dedicated in the monitoring and financial and logistical nature of Al-Qaeda. Just a month later, the Central Intelligence Agency and all of its people begin its own unit dedicated to tracking Osama bin Laden and the al-Qaeda cell. David Cohen, and head of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center in 1996, wanted to implement a virtual station modeled on the agency's overseas station and act as one station sharing the data collected in the region. Cohen had a hard time, however, figuring out who would run their station and found the perfect candidate at the time. Someone who could speak Farsi, Arabic, and understood the nature of Sunni-Shia divide in the al-Qaeda cell. There was one whose name who stood out, and that name was that the Islamic fundamentalist extremist expert Michael Schuer. The station opened, and officially at the very end of January 1996, the station would open as a unique group which would have personnel consisting of FBI, CIA, NSA, and DIA. Holy crap, that is just the three-letter agency soup. Formerly titled the Brin-Landon Issue Station, it was codenamed Alex Station after Michael Schuer's son. CIA Chief George Tenet in 1996 would claim the unit's mission was to track intelligence regarding bin Laden and run operations against him while disrupting his finances. And, this isn't even the nature of why someone like Osama bin Laden hated us. He had a doctrine that explained why he hated the United States, and what we were sold on was well, you're hated because you're free. And it was well, we have to attack them over there, otherwise they're going to attack us over here. Which turned out to be a lie, as was all of it. It was well, we don't go over there. There's going to be nukes going off in Kansas, which is another line that George W. Bush loved to run. But the thing that's most important about this is the reason why someone like Osama bin Laden really hated the United States was because it was well, you're propping up brutal dictators and slaughtering innocent people in the Muslim world. You have your bases in our Holy Land. You're propping up Israel, which slaughters the Palestinian people. And then you're just fomenting revolution and destroying our fucking countries non-stop, back to back. And this goes with the whole thing of what General Wesley Clark talked about when he talked about the memo that it was, I believe it was, we're going to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. And I can pull up that clip and I'll play it right here.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me."
As General Wesley Clark stated, 7 countries in 5 years. And this kind of empire expansionist mentality, this expansionist foreign policy that we see from the United States that's completely ginned up the rest of the world against us, which has now actually partially led to the disaster that we're dealing with the state of the dollar, with countries like Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and India coming together to try and form a new currency. And that is going to be an absolute blow to the dollar's dominance in the world. So the thing that I find so interesting about the video with General Wesley Clark is how much it ties in perfectly to something Ron Paul said when he was talking to Giuliani on the debate stage for the 2008 presidential election. And I'll end up just queuing that clip up in just a second. But what was so fascinating about it is he said 7 countries in 5 years. And I think that is such an important factor to harp on, because he also says, he's like, well, we have a good military and we don't know what to do about terrorists. So I guess if you have a hammer, the only thing is that every problem looks like a nail. And this is an absolutely perfectly stated way of how we look at the world. And later on in that clip, he actually talks about the fact of he doesn't believe that we would have gone to the Middle East if there wasn't oil, because he's like, look at Africa. No one intervenes, and we lobby for people not to do so, and it's because there's no oil in Africa. And I'd argue that's absolutely true, because the whole factor is the Middle East is rich with minerals. It's rich with oil, and it's the reason we're currently occupying a third of Syria. And which third of Syria is that? It's the third with all of the oil. So I'll go ahead and tie us into this Ron Paul clip where it's the Giuliani moment, if you will. I would argue it should be called the Ron Paul moment personally, but that's just me. And I think it's absolutely one of the greatest pieces of standing for what is true in the moment, because I've said this before, and I don't remember what video it was, but I said it's no matter what it is important to speak yourself and speak the truth, no matter how many people tell you it's false, as long as you know it's true, because whatever you're doing and wherever you end up in the right place. And what Ron Paul did spurred a liberty movement that pushed an anti-war campaign that hadn't been seen since the Vietnam era. And it created an entire new generation of people that were anti-war. And this is something that needs to be taken with great weight and great value. So let's go ahead and jump into Ron Paul.
Congressman Paul, I believe you are the only man on the stage who opposes the war in Iraq, who would bring the troops home as quickly as almost immediately, sir. Are you out of step with your party? Is your party out of step with the rest of the world? If either of those is the case, why are you seeking its nomination?
Well, I think the party has lost its way because the conservative wing of the Republican Party always advocated a non-interventionist foreign policy. Senator Robert Taft didn't want to be in NATO. George Bush won the election in year 2000 campaigning on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. Republicans were elected to end the Korean War. The Republicans were elected to end the Vietnam War. There's a strong tradition of being anti-war in the Republican Party. It is the constitutional position. It is the advice of the founders to follow a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of entangling alliances. Be friends with countries. Negotiate and talk with them and trade with them. Just think of the tremendous improvement relationships with Vietnam. We lost 60,000 men. We came home in defeat. Now we go over there and invest in Vietnam. So there's a lot of merit to the advice of the founders and following the Constitution. And my argument is that we shouldn't go to war so carelessly. When we do, the wars don't end.
Congressman, you don't think that changed with the 9/11 attack, sir?
What changed?
The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. And they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They've already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Wendell, may I make a comment on that? That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11. And I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists. And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there. I mean, what would we think if we were, if other foreign countries were doing that to us?
As per usual, Ron Paul says it best. But the thing that he talks about when he brings up the nature of blowback, and that's absolutely what caused 9/11, and it's what caused Russia to react the way they have and why they've invaded the sovereign state of Ukraine. And I just can't imagine the nature of someone who doesn't think about the perspective of their opposition, because it truly shows such a narrow-minded perspective. And I believe this is the peak of empire mentality, that people that believe nothing but U.S. expansionist foreign policy will solve the problems of the world. And this is a real big issue with the China hawks as well, that are currently ginning up war against China, war against Russia. And it's the same exact morons that led us through 30 years of reconstruction in the Middle East that are now leading us on this charge against Russia. I just don't see how this plays out well. Back to the article. A 50-50 chance of Saudi involvement. In 1996, Alex Station was created under the watch of the CIA. The initiative was supposed to comprise a joint investigative effort with the FBI. However, the FBI operatives assigned to the unit soon found they were prohibited from passing any information to the Bureau's head office without CIA authorization, and they also faced harsh penalties for doing so. Efforts to share information with the FBI's equivalent unit, the I-49 Squad, based in New York, were repeatedly blocked. In late 1999, the system went blinking red about an imminent large-scale al-Qaeda terror attack inside the U.S. CIA and NSA were closely monitoring an operational cadre within an al-Qaeda cell that included Saudi nationals. The pair would purportedly go on to hijack American Airlines Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon on 9/11. There was a meeting that took place between al-Qaeda at a summit on January 5th through 8th in the year 2000 in Malaysia. The meeting was secretly photographed and videotaped by local authorities at Alex Station, although apparently no audio was captured. It says, a contemporaneous internal CIA cable stated that the information was repeatedly passed to the FBI for further investigation, quote-unquote. In reality, Alex Station not only failed to inform the Bureau of Midahar's U.S. visit, but also expressly forbade 2 FBI agents assigned to the unit from doing so. I said, we've got to tell the Bureau about this. These guys are clearly bad. We've got to tell the FBI. And then the CIA said to me, no, it's not the FBI's case, not the FBI's jurisdiction. Mark Rossini, one of the FBI agents in question, has alleged if we had picked up the phone and called the Bureau, I would have been violating the law, I would have been removed from the building that day, I would have had my clearances suspended, and I would have been gone. And this comes with the nature of like the myth of objective law. And people will try and use this argument like, well, it's the law, so you have to follow the law. It's like, yeah, slavery was the law. So you're going to say, what? I was just following orders. It's like, congratulations, you just pigeonholed yourself into the Nuremberg defense. That's not a very strong moral high ground to stand upon. Well, I was just following orders. On January 15th, Hamzi Madir entered the U.S. through Los Angeles International Airport just weeks after the foiled Millennium Plot. And the Millennium Plot was basically, in the year 1999, it was going to roll over to the year 2000. It was going to be the new millennium, and there was going to be this massive terror attack, and it was foiled. And it's on December 14th, 1999, Ahmed Rassim, a 32-year-old Algerian, aroused suspicion of alert border guards at Port Angeles, Washington, as he attempted to enter the country. And he had 100 pounds of white powder, later determined to be urea sulfate, as well as approximately 8 ounces of a highly volatile nitroglycerin mixture and system components. And the whole plan was to effectively cause as much terror as possible because, as we said, this is the nature of blowback. We're attacking you over there, so we're going to attack you over here. And that's really all it is. It says, in interviews with Operation Encore investigators years later, Bayami alleged his run-in with the two would-be hijackers as mere happenstance. His extraordinary practical and financial support was claimed that it was simply charitable, motivated by sympathy for the pair who could barely speak English and were unfamiliar with Western culture. And it's clearly speaking about the people who were the part of the 9/11 hijacking that took the Flight 77 into the Pentagon. And the idea that you would say, oh, well, it was really just I was supporting them because I was a charitable man, you see. They were poor. They didn't understand the language. They needed money. They needed backing and support. The Bureau disagreed, concluding Bayami was a Saudi spy who handled a number of al-Qaeda operatives in the U.S. They also considered that there is a 50-50 chance he and, by extension, Riyadh had detailed of advanced knowledge of the 9/11 attacks. And this link right here takes us over to this article. And this video is quite fascinating. It's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. I'll go ahead and cue that up. But it's talking about new FBI documents link Saudi spy in California to 9/11 attacks, Mike Kelly. And this is from North Jersey, and my gosh, is the North Jersey accent just ever so heavy. I didn't read the title of, like, who heralded the website, right? And I just jumped into the video initially, and I heard this really, really thick accent. I was like, what is that? It's New Jersey. All right, let's go ahead and jump on into that.
And in 1997, I started working counterterrorism matters on the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York. And then in 1999, January 1999, I became the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force representative to the CIA's. In January 2000, my colleague, Special Agent Doug Miller, and I learned about a terror summit, a meeting in Malaysia of terrorists that had assembled from around the globe. That information was put into a cable and sent to CIA headquarters. Doug Miller writes what's called a CIR, a Central Intelligence Report, to advise the FBI about this meeting in Malaysia and the fact that one of them, Khalil Midhar, had a visa to travel to the U.S. And the CIA denied or refused to send Doug's memo after both of us trying to intervene and ask them why they wouldn't send it. And we got no answer, just that it's not a matter for the FBI, and they'll tell the FBI when they want to, and he and I are to shut up and not say anything about it. So Doug and I tried in vain to have the FBI informed of what happened, and eventually, one by one, the hijackers came to America, and they started to make their journey around America, from California and from landing in JFK and in Newark Airport, congregating first in Virginia, and then they made up their way to Paterson, New Jersey, and then eventually some of them ended up here at the Congress Inn in South Hackensack, New Jersey. They lived in plain sight. They didn't hide anything, and only if the CIA had let Doug and I inform the FBI about the meeting in Malaysia and their visas to get to the U.S. and their arrival in the U.S. in January 2000, we would have been able to stop 9/11. 9/11 would not have happened. It's not the greatest intelligence failure in American history. It's a willful, purposeful failure to share information. And that's what I've been trying to get at for the last 20 years and understand why. That terrorists who were right here at this hotel were able to perpetrate the greatest criminal terrorist attack in U.S. history with impunity. And no one's ever been held accountable for it as to why Doug and I were not allowed to tell the FBI. And that is a crime. That needs to be accounted for. That cannot be excused.
The most unusual CIA unit indeed. Alex Station's former remit was to track bin Laden, collect intelligence on him, run operations against him, disrupt his finances, and warn policymakers about his activities and intentions. These activities would naturally entail enlisting informants within al-Qaeda. It says a most unusual CIA unit for the title of this section of the article, and honestly, if you come from my line of thinking and my school of thought, you very well could make the argument that this is the par that they shoot for. But again, that's just my bias speaking. Nonetheless, several high-level sources told Sinestro it was extremely unusual for such an entity to be involved in gathering intel and recruiting assets. The U.S.-based unit was run by CIA analysts who do not typically manage human assets. Legally, that work is the exclusive preserve of case officers trained in covert operations and based overseas. CS-10, a case officer within Alex Station, concurred that the proposition that Hazmi and Midhar enjoyed a relationship with the CIA through Buyami and was baffled that the unit was tasked with attempting to penetrate al-Qaeda in the first place. They felt it would be nearly impossible to develop informants inside the group, given that the virtual station was based in the Langley basement several thousand miles away from the country where al-Qaeda was suspected of operating. CS-10 further testified that they observed other unusual activities at Alex Station. Analysts within the unit would direct operations to case officers in the field, sending the officers cables instructing them to do specific tasking, which was a violation of CIA procedures. Analysts normally lack the authority to direct a case officer to do anything. And I wonder if this is the nature of you hold more authority than you actually state, like you're somewhat subversively hiding your power level, like you're playing the role of an analyst but you're effectively something higher. But again, this is speculatus, so grain of salt. CS-11, a CIA operations specialist with the case to the post of Alex Station, sometime prior to 9/11 attacks, said that they likewise observed activity that appeared to be outside normal CIA procedures. Analysts within the unit mostly stuck to themselves and did not interact frequently with others. When communicating with one another through internal cables, they also used operational pseudonyms, which CS-11 described as peculiar as they were not working undercover and their employment with the CIA was not classified information. Well, not working undercover as far as you knew. In early 1998, while on a CIA mission to penetrate London's Islamist, a joint FBI-CIA informant named Akuya Collins received a stunning offer. Bin Laden himself wanted him to go to Afghanistan so he could meet the Afghanistan, my word, Austin. Collins relayed the request to his superiors. While the FBI was in favor of infiltrating al-Qaeda's base, his CIA handlers nixed the idea, saying there was no way the U.S. would approve of an American operative going undercover into bin Laden's camps, which just seems so far outside the purview of what the U.S. would allow. And I mean, like, it seems like they would normally allow this, and the fact that the CIA is stumping someone at every turn to do this is a bit suspicious. Similarly, in June 2001, CIA and FBI analysts from Alex Station met with their senior bureau officials, including representatives of its own al-Qaeda unit. The CIA shared 3 photos of individuals who attacked the Kuala Lumpur meeting 18 months earlier, including Hazmi Midahar, and however, as an FBI counter-terrorist officer codenamed CS-15 recalled, the dates of the photos and key details about the figures they depicted were never revealed. Instead, the analyst simply asked if the FBI knew the identities of the individuals in the photos. Another FBI official present, CS-12, offers an even more damning account. The Alex Station analyst not only failed to offer biographical information, but falsely implied one of the individuals might be Fad al-Quso, a suspect in the bombing of the USS Cole. And if you're not aware of the USS Cole, it was essentially like a naval vessel in the port of Aman in Yemen, and Islamist extremists with al-Qaeda suicide bombed it and blew out the side of it after getting the attention of the people on board, and they killed like 17 U.S. soldiers. So, it says, what's more, the outright refused to answer any questions related to the photographs. Nonetheless, it was confirmed that no system was in place to alert the FBI if any of those 3 entered the U.S., a standard investigative technique for terror suspects. Given Hazmi and Midahar appeared to be simultaneously working for Alex Station in some capacity, the June 2001 meeting may well be in a dangle. No intelligence value could be extracted from inquiring whether the Bureau knew who their assets were, apart from asserting if the FBI's counter-terror team was aware of their identities, physical appearances, and presence in the U.S. We're going to go ahead and jump into the next part of this. Let's go. Another of Sinestro's sources, a former FBI agent who went by CS-23, testified that after 9/11, FBI headquarters in its San Diego field office quickly learned of Bayomi's affiliation with Saudi intelligence and subsequently the existence of CIA operation to recruit Hazmi and Midahar. However, senior FBI officials suppressed investigations into these matters. How are these people not in jail? Oh wait, we know, because people fail upwards consistently in government. CS-23 alleged furthermore that Bureau agents testifying before the joint inquiry into 9/11 were instructed not to reveal the full extent of Saudi involvement with al-Qaeda. Wonder about Israel. The U.S. intelligence community would have had every reason to shield Riyadh from scrutiny and consequences for its role in the 9/11 attacks, as it was one of the closest allies. But the FBI's eager complicity in Alex Station's cover-up may have been motivated by self-interest, as its own was intimately involved in the unit's effort to recruit Hazmi and Midahar and conceal their presence in the U.S. and relevant authorities. CS-12, who attended the June 2001 meeting with Alex Station, told Sinestro that they continued to press FBI headquarters for further information regarding the subjects in the photographs. Over that summer, on August 23rd, they stumbled upon an electronic communication from FBI headquarters, which identified Hazmi and Midahar and noted they were in the U.S. CS-12 then contacted the FBI analyst with Alex Station, who had authored the communication. The conversation quickly became heated, and the analyst ordered them to delete the memo immediately, as they were not authorized to view it. While unnamed in the declaration, the FBI analyst in question was Dina Corsi. So they request that you delete the information, even though that at the behest of you understanding it may lead to that of lives saved. The nature of the state, I would argue. The next day of the conference call between CS-12, Corsi, and the FBI's Bin Laden unit chief, officials at the head FBI office, explicitly told CS-12 to stand down and cease looking for Midahar, and the Bureau intended to open an intelligence-gathering investigation on him. The next day, CS-12 emailed Corsi stating bluntly, someone is going to die unless Midahar was pursued criminally. And someone did die, and it was 2,996 people on 9/11. It's tragic. It was surely no coincidence that 2 days later, on August 26, Alex Station finally informed the FBI that Hazmi and Midahar were in the U.S. But by then, the pair had entered final phase for their preparations for the impending attack. If a criminal probe had opened, that they could have been stopped into their tracks. Instead, as foreshadowing by the officials in contact with CS-12, an intelligence investigation was launched which hindered any search efforts. Man, I wonder what this will lead to, because Trump talked about, like, releasing the 9/11 documents, and he somewhat did so to the family members. And in the process, when they wanted to get more documents because they ended up suing the intelligence apparatus, what they did, and not just the intelligence apparatus, but the Saudi government, and in the process, what Trump did was he ended up making sure that the rest of the files couldn't be gone through. And it's like, so what was even the point of you? Every single time he went to go do something good, he would fold on it like a fucking coward. The whole thing was, even Obama knew that you shouldn't be sitting there giving weapons to Ukraine because this is a bright red line for Russia. And what did Trump do? He's sitting there, he's telling the prosecutor in Ukraine, hey, I want you to sit here and investigate Hunter Biden. I want you to tell me and give me the information of what's going on. And this is what became the quid pro quo. But the thing is, and Trump's saying, well, I'm not going to give you the weapons unless you fire the prosecutor. It's like, okay, so here's the deal. But here, and this is what's so fucked, is Trump did the thing that even Obama knew not to do. And he caved, and he gave them the weapons anyway. But I'm not going to go down this rant right now. This is just going to make this video so much longer. It was surely no coincidence that 2 days later, August 26, Alex Station finally informed the FBI that Hazmi and Midahar were in the U.S. By then, the pair had entered the final phase of preparations for the impending attacks. We just read this. In the days immediately after the 9/11 attacks, CS-12 and other New York-based FBI agents participated in another call with the Bureau headquarters. During the conversation, they learned Hazmi and Midahar were named on Flight 77's manifest. One analyst on the line ran the pair of names through the commercial databases, quickly finding them in their home addresses in San Diego's local phone directory. It turns out they had been living with an FBI informant. Say the line, Bart. He was on our radar all along. Every single time. Every single time. CS-12 soon contacted Corsi regarding information of the hijackers. She responded by providing a photograph with the same surveillance operation that produced the 3 pictures presented at the June 2001 meeting between Alex Station and the FBI agents. They depicted Walid bin Attash, a lead suspect in al-Qaeda's 1998 East Africa U.S. Embassy bombings, and its attack on the USS Cole. And if you're not aware of the USS Cole, the USS Cole was effectively a vessel, and I believe it was a naval vessel that was in the port of Yemen in Amen. And what happened was there were some, I believe it was Al-Qaeda soldiers, and they were effectively suicide bombers, and they went up to the side and they got the attention of the people on board, and then they blew a hole in the side of the hull, and it killed 17 people. And I believe they were in their way to make en route to the Persian Gulf, if I'm correct about this. But anyways, nonetheless. Corsi was unable to explain why the photo was not shown to FBI agents earlier. If it had been, CS-12 claims that they would have immediately linked Hazmi and Midahar to bin Attash, which would have shifted from an intelligence-based investigation into a criminal investigation. The FBI's New York field office could have then devoted its full resources to finding the hijackers before the fateful day of September 11, 2001. And this is exactly what ties into the video that we had just played prior to this, where it was the FBI agent who was one of the people in this investigation who was trying to get the information out, who was getting stifled at every turn. And I feel like that says enough that the CIA in itself is a criminal institution that, much like the Federal Reserve, should be audited and then destroyed and blown to the wind in 1,000 pieces, as JFK once said. Alright, we're coming to the end of this, and let's go ahead and jump into this. So, this really shouldn't take too long now. Hopefully, if you stayed this long, thank you very much. Let's finish. Alex Station operatives fail upwards. And this is something I've been talking about for a long, long time, is the concept of failing upwards. And to all the people that are my friends that have had the misfortune of hearing me talk about this consistently for so long, whether it's talking about the nature of Hollywood and the people that are in the activist class that are destroying the comic book industry, the gaming industry, or the movie industry, as well as the fact of the people that fail upwards within government that exist within the spectrum of allowable opinion, and as long as they do so, and when they fail, they don't do so and tarnish the regime, they have the capacity to fail upward with great perseverance. And the factor that you can see this really with is the people who completely destroyed the Middle East and bungled foreign policy from the United States over the past 50 years. And when you see this, what you notice is, well, These are the same people that are now spearheading us into Russia and Ukraine's current conflict. And I don't know how you could describe this as anything but failing upwards if you bungled this and caused the deaths of 1.5 million people at minimum, and you're now spearheading a new war, and you're the person front running it. I just don't understand how else that could be construed as anything but failing upwards. Anyways, Alex Station's tireless efforts to protect its al-Qaeda assets raises the obvious question of whether Hamza and Madar and possibly other hijackers were in effect working for the CIA on the day of 9/11. The real motives behind the CIA's stonewalling may never be known, but it appears abundantly clear that Alex Station did not want the FBI to know about or interfere in its secret intelligence operation. If its unit's recruitment of Hamza or Madar was purely dedicated to information gathering rather than operational direction, it is incomprehensible that the FBI had not been apprised and was instead actively misdirected. Several FBI sources consulted by Sinestro speculated that the CIA's desperation to penetrate al-Qaeda prompted it to grant Alex Station the power to recruit assets and pressured it to do so. But if this were truly the case, then why did Langley refuse the opportunity to send Akuya Collins, a proven deep cover asset who had infiltrated several Islamist gangs, to penetrate bin Laden's network in Afghanistan, which is the questions we were asking earlier? One alternative explanation is that Alex Station, a powerful rogue CIA team answerable and accountable to no one, sought to infiltrate the terror group for its own sinister purposes, without the authorization and oversight usually required by Langley in such circumstances. Given that and Collins was a joint asset shared with the FBI, he cannot be trusted to participate in such a sensitive black operation. No member of Alex Station was ever punished in any way for the supposed intelligence failures that allowed 9/11 to go ahead. In fact, they have been rewarded. Richard Blee, the unit's chief at the time of attacks, and his successor Alfred Fransko Belowski both joined the CIA's operations division and became highly influential figures in the so-called War on Terror. Corsi, for her part, was promoted at the FBI, eventually rising to the rank of Deputy Assistant Director for Intelligence, as we were saying before. In perverse twist, the Senate Intelligence Committee report on the CIA's torture program found that Bukowski had been a key player in the agency's black site machinations and one of their chief public apologists. It is increasingly clear that the program was specifically concerned with eliciting false testimony from suspects in order to justify and expand the U.S. war on terror. The public's understanding of the 9/11 attacks is heavily informed by testimonies delivered by CIA torture victims under extreme duress imaginable, or the most extreme duress imaginable, and Bukowski, a veteran of Alex Station that ran over at least 2 would-be 9/11 hijackers, had been in charge of interrogating the alleged perpetrators of the attacks. The veteran FBI deep cover agent Akuya Collins concluded in his memoir with a chilling reflection, which is only reinforced by Don Sinestro's Bombshell declaration. I was very mistrustful about the fact that bin Laden's name was mentioned literally hours after the attack. I became very skeptical about anything that anybody said about what had happened or who did it. I thought back to when I was still working for them and we had the opportunity to enter bin Laden's camp. Something just hadn't smelled right. To this day, I was unsure who was behind September 11th, nor can I even guess. Someday the truth will reveal itself, and I have a feeling that the people won't like what they hear. And I think that is such a foreboding warning and such an accurate statement to a T. And I think it stresses the point that honestly I live by when it comes to the narrative of the state. You cannot trust anything they say, because at best what you should do is take them at the face that they are lying, and then you work your way back from there, and you can work your way to the truth. But at minimum, if you use this metric, you will most of the time come out on top with the truth. I'd argue majority of the time before most people, solely on the factor that you're using the simplest metric ever. It's literally Occam's razor. The simplest thing is usually the right thing. And that's quite literally it. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and give this a like if you enjoyed it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Go ahead and tell someone that you know you love them. Share this with someone that you enjoy. Share this with people you enjoy, and let them know if you enjoyed this. Go ahead. Thank you very much for watching. This was a long endeavor, longer than intended, honestly. But, yeah. Thank you very much. Stay safe.